Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. George McMillan III is still around. I have a new shirt, in case you guys didn't notice in the last episode. This is a new shirt bought specifically for recordings. George is looking all Florida-like, even though he is in Texas. We got into all kinds of interesting topics. In case you missed the last talk, it was like a roundup of interesting stories that George has to talk about. George, thank you for sticking around for another hour or more. This might be the more academic and the less comedic version of this talk. It is still a comedy show, and nothing we say here has anything to do with reality. This are the Fab 3000s in their original design. These are the new bombs that have gotten wings that were discussed a couple of talks ago. This is archival pictures. They're pretty big boys, I'd say.
Yeah.
Russian.
Is that the 2,000-pound version there?
No, that's a 3,000, and it's not pounds. Oh. It's kilos, but it's only got 1,200 kilos of explosive. So that's about 3,000 pounds of explosive, basically.
If anybody, well, from being in Iraq and Afghanistan, when a 1,000-pound bomb goes off, it will shake everything around. It seems like it's about 5.5 on the Richter scale. It will shake buildings in about a 1 mile radius. So you're talking about 3 times that. Yeah, that's like a mini earthquake.
Yeah,
and it'll shake buildings that'll probably shake buildings back and forth for probably about 2 miles away, or maybe 3. I don't know. But it's and when bomb blasts like that go off, the ground will shake, and then you can get a rough estimate of distance by how long it takes the sound to travel there. So if there's a 2 or 3, basically it's about 1 kilometer for every second. So if the building shakes and then a couple of seconds later you hear the sound of the explosion, then it's a couple of kilometers away. So that thing's going to be shaking buildings probably for 5, 6, 7 kilometers away. So those things are pretty horrific. I've been around when Katyusha rockets have gone off in my location, and when 1,000-pound V-beds have gone off in my location. And they're pretty horrific.
V-bed being vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. V-bed.
Yeah? Right. A dump truck V-bed. I've had several of those gone off in my vicinity in the places that I've traveled in, which is, again, that's why you should have some, unlike Gonzalo, you should have some training before you go into these locations. But those things are, those things have got to be extremely frightening to be around. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, we get into some more petrodollar pipelines and geopolitical, what are they called? Treaties, I guess. Did you see the new Top Gear? These two went for a ride. The full story, for those who don't know, is that Putin gave Kim Jong-un a car when Kim Jong-un went to Russia. And then when Putin came to North Korea, Kim Jong-un let Putin drive around in the car that he had been gifted by Putin himself. What do you think did you hear about the defense pact? Did you hear that they're like, an attack on North Korea is like an attack on Russia, vice versa, etc., blah, blah, so on? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I think I heard that on the Duran the other day, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I glanced through a whole bunch of stuff. But that's, again, the reason why I keep on going back to the 6 power center strategies that we talked about is... and then land power versus sea power. The West doctrine is to envelop Russia, encircle Russia from the coastal region of Eurasia.
Whoa! I don't I know what that was. Okay, I know what that was. I just have to find the tab. In the meantime, you can keep going. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if the sea power doctrine is to encircle Russia from around Eurasia, whether it be through Europe, well, wherever there's water, Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean, prevent Russia from getting a warm water port. In the Pacific, they call it the first island chain strategy. After World War II, the United States moved into Japan, took over Korea, the Japanese islands, the Philippine islands, and Taiwan, all the islands, in order to contain China and Russia. Strategies of containment. Strategies of containment started out containing the Soviet Union, but then when Mao Zedong defeated Chiang Kai-shek and all the other warlords and took over China, then it was a strategy of containment of both Russia and China. So when Soviet Union ended and Russia went back to being Russia, Putin had respected the Western sanctions against North Korea, but since with all the sanctions and encircling of Russia, now that's driven Russia and China closer together when they're supposed to try to separate them, and it's driven Russia and North Korea closer together. Okay, in the last video I talked about that pipeline has been proposed for I want to say at least 12 years, going down from Vladivostok region down to through North Korea and through South Korea. So I'm just going to go out on way out on a limb that Putin is probably going to try to push that pipeline through the Korean Peninsula, while also forming a military alliance with North Korea, because the West can't sanction Russia or North Korea anymore.
Sanctions are working. Did you hear? Russians have become the fourth largest economy in the world, surpassing Japan.
Yeah, and again, people we did a very detailed, we need to do it again. We need to do the Russian strategic plan that we did. When was that? Back in the beginning of 22? Or
too long ago, man. You're right. We need to do it again. We need to do it again in a more comedic fashion.
Yeah, because when the West went into, and Jeffrey Sachs he alludes to this, but I don't think he talks about it enough. Actually, he was in the Sadlin 500 transition plan, 500-day transition plan, and the redevelopment plan of Eastern Europe, which to include Russia. And the Western companies went in there and showed Russia how to extract oil, natural gas, and everything else. But the plan was to try to take the profits out so Russia couldn't develop economically internally. So Putin, that was during the Yeltsin administration. So when Putin came to power, he's trying to reverse that. He's trying to bring the profits back. The more that he tries to bring the profits back and reinvest in Russia, the more the United States increases its strategy of containment policies. So again, it's the United States trying to shut off Russian oil and natural gas from reaching Western Europe is finally when Putin just said, to hell with it. We're going to develop with China and the rest of the Asian powers, and we're just going to totally try to get out of the West and divert all the Russian natural gas to everywhere else. So in an overland strategy, so the sea power strategies won't work. You're trying to get around maritime choke point strategies. We went over that in detail. We'll have to do separate slide sets on that. But yes, why is Putin in North Korea? It's always foreign military sales and pipelines. He never talks about one without talking to the other. The Western media just talks about, oh, he's desperate for more artillery shells. They're running out of shells. No, he's just saying, to hell with it. We're sanctioned. We might as well just integrate with everybody who else is sanctioned. So it's North Korea on one side to stop a sea power strategy on that side, and then it's Iran on the other. Because if the Western powers want to access Caspian Sea oil and gas, they need to destabilize Iran, which seems to be the strategy because it's the weakest link. They can't destabilize Russia. They can't destabilize China. Therefore, Iran is the easiest target to access Caspian Sea oil and gas to deliver to Western Europe before they completely collapse. That's, again, the race against time that we were talking about in the previous video. So yes, you asked me about North Korea, and that's the first island chain strategy, but it's also connected to, well, what are the West's alternative strategies? So Russia isn't making these overtures to Iran and North Korea arbitrarily. It's a counter strategy to Western sea land strategy. It's an overland strategy versus a sea power strategy. So that's the essence of that relationship.
As you said, it is something that we've discussed in detail quite a couple of times. And one of the reasons that I wanted to draw attention to that is because Mike Jones, also known as the foreign agent, sent this along. This is Larry Johnson at SPF. Have a listen.
The United States, which claims to advocate for a free market capitalist system, essentially committed suicide by imposing the sanctions on Russia. We do not, if you look at the history of economic sanctions, you can't point to a single instance in history, going back to the sanctions imposed on the Japanese prior to World War II, that has caused a change in the policy of another government or caused that other government to change and do what the United States wants it to do. The sanctions didn't work with Japan. They didn't work with Cuba in 1960, 61. They have not worked with Iran. And now when they tried to do it to Russia, it's one thing to impose sanctions on a country like Cuba. Their exports are bananas, sugarcane, pineapples, and cigars. Russia is the #1 country in the world in terms of natural resources. Oil, gas, gold, aluminum, titanium, nickel, nitrogen. We just go on down the list. And what that means is that Russia is inoculated against Western sanctions. So the United States, by imposing these sanctions and trying to cut Russia out of international commerce and unable to access the US dollar, simply accelerated the process that Russia was already pursuing with China and the other BRICS nations to set up an alternative financial system that would not be held hostage to the West.
How familiar does all that sound?
Yeah, again, okay, since you get a whole bunch of people, you get a whole bunch of news shows, right? Okay. Well, okay. In contrast to the news shows, we do strategic modeling shows.
Did I just trigger you? Did I just trigger you?
Okay. No,
I was triggered. I told him to go check out the playlist, and I told him that Larry Johnson has already probably seen your playlist on my channel. That was my response when he forwarded this video to my channel. So like I like, you know, let him know. In any case, I'll forward him this video too. But you
traded comms with him?
Yeah, huh?
You traded comms with Larry Johnson?
No, with what's his face, Mike Jones, also known as foreign agent, who had met what's his face, Larry Johnson at SPF in St. Petersburg. In any case, continue.
Yeah.
We do strategic. That's where you were.
Yeah, there's people talking about individual news. So what we do, because we don't want to be like, you know, every other. I don't want to cover, you know, the same news that other people are doing. So yes,
strategic comedy, strategically funny stuff.
Yeah. So what I do is I just interpreted these events. I put it in context of the sea power versus land power strategies, because once you know those things, these day-to-day events, when you start to use analytical frameworks, you can arrive at conclusions very, very quickly, because frameworks of analysis are pattern recognition tools. So yeah, when he talks about that, he's right. So if the sea power strategy is to take the coastal rimland area of Eurasia, then what's Russia and China's counter strategy? Well, it's going to be a Promethean dime overland integration strategy to as many countries as possible. And once you start to understand the sea power versus land power strategies, okay, the West has the sea power encirclement strategies, so Russia is an integration and a breakout strategy. So when you start analyzing what China is doing in their Silk Road program, that's an overland integration strategy with Central Asia to get oil and gas and agricultural products and a whole bunch of other minerals. Same thing with Russia. It's an overland integration strategy. The Silken Road program is to put seaports in the Indian Ocean side, so ships from the Middle East and Africa can dock, well, okay, in Guadar Port, Chabahar Port, or Chakwa Port, offload oil, natural gas, send it by pipeline and railroad, and avoid going through the Malacca Strait. There is a reason why I say that. It's because recently, China within the past couple of years has been increasing their military maneuvers around Taiwan. And everyone, does the master of the obvious comment that, well, they're going to take Taiwan by force. Okay, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But what they are doing, if you add that up with taking over the Spratly Islands and all those man-made atolls and islands in the South China Sea, with the Philippines on one side and Vietnam on the other, with that 9-dash line, or I guess now it's a 10-dash line strategy, what they're really communicating to the West and the Western allies, South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Japan, is if the West is going to choke off the Straits of Hormuz and the Straits of Malacca, well, then China is going to choke off the South China Sea and cut off all the U.S. allies from getting oil and natural gas. That's the big takeaway from China's aggressive policy of continuously doing these war maneuvers around Taiwan. It's to tell South Korea and China, buy Russian oil and gas in rubles and exit the petrodollar. They want more countries to exit the petrodollar, to collapse the dollar and collapse the United States. And then they'll take over Taiwan.
Enter the Houthis.
Okay.
I just want to... One of my favorite channels on YouTube, a long time ago, Geography Now, I think it's called. I'm not good with names. He did a recent video on Yemen, and this is a still from his video. I might actually leave a link to his video down below. It's funny that the north-south divide of Yemen falls basically on the divide of these two oil fields and the pipelines. Comments? I immediately thought of you and pipelines and petrodollars.
Yeah.
So,
well, wherever there's pipelines, they need democracy, right? wherever there's oil and gas, they need democracy now.
They've obviously gotten more than their fair share of democracy in Yemen, because Yemen closed down this route, which adds another, 4,000 miles to circumnavigate Africa.
Focus in on Strait of Bab el-Mandab real quick.
Bab el-Mandab.
Yeah, right there. You got it.
That's as far as I can go.
Yeah, you got it. Okay. Since the Tehran Revolution in 1979, Tehran has been trying. If you look at a Sunni versus Shia map, Iran has been trying to reach out to all the Shia area countries, and yes, it's all in the Persian Gulf area for the Shia Arab, and also down in Yemen. And the Sunnis have been trying to break out and encircle Iran. All right. So the Iranian-backed Houthis are trying to block the Strait of Al-Mandab because the United States uses its navy to block all the other maritime, choke points. So if the United States can block choke points, they are, it'd be Iran, but it's also with the support of Russia and China because they're getting their armaments from someplace. They're demonstrating that they can also, block off choke points. So Iran can block off Strait of Hormuz on one side, and it can use the Shia Houthis to block off the Strait of Bab al-Mandab on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula. The United States is demonstrating that they can block off the Suez Canal and the Straits of Gibraltar and the Straits of Malacca. So again, the Chinese are demonstrating by being active in Taiwan in the South China Sea that they can block the Strait of Malacca from the other side. So people need to start seeing this is a maritime choke point strategies of who controls what territory and can restrict what and apply what kind of sanctions on the other. So in this one, okay, it's not legal sanctions through the UN or any kind of organizing international body. It's just saying that they can just de facto stop it, stop that choke point. So that's what that's about.
All right, excellent. So we've got that academic stuff to get into, but I was thinking before we do that, this came across my feed the other day, and I think this pretty much goes into what we've got going. The term far right has become so loosely applied that it is effectively useless in sniffing out genuine cases of extremism, and more often used to slander reasonable people. The left, the right, and the far right, where the left has now become what we formerly knew as the extreme left, which kind of gets into what you've got lined up for us here, right?
Yeah. Boy, there's so many different ways you can address that. Well, you have two different continuums. You have a cosmopolitan versus a xenophobic continuum. So far right used to mean xenophobic. You also have an authoritarian versus libertarian continuum, where if you want free markets, you're libertarian. So I'm also in school, Adam Smith and Mises and Hayek. Whenever the more active the government is in the economy, the more collateral damage than they do solve problems. So aside from providing infrastructure, they should pretty much, stay out of the rest of it. The authoritarian scale, and that one is Marx of central planning. That's always ends up being a disaster. So yeah, they try to conflate xenophobia with also believing in free markets, so that way they can just call everybody free, far right. So yes, they confuse these terms continuously. And then, okay, Aristotle's 6 forms of government. Socialism is always a centrally planned economy is a perverted form of government, for a whole bunch of different reasons that we won't get into right now. So they purposely take out the ancient Greek classical government form theories so you can actually understand that socialism is a tyrannical form of government. And then they like to confuse, being far right with ultra xenophobic. So if you're free market like myself and not xenophobic, I travel the world. I got everybody as friends, right? Pretty much. They would try to call a free market person like me ultra far right. So they use it to slander everybody. So yeah.
You're definitely far right. This is a crazy conspiracy theory far right Russian propaganda comedy show, and you basically helped me get started. So you're definitely far right.
Yeah. Well. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to shout out to everybody who tunes in live to the premieres because we've got one going on now. This is like a live premiere that's going on now, and I'm actually chatting in the other tab while I'm recording with you. So shout out to everybody who's in this live chat now. Leave a comment. Also, George, do you want to get into the nitty-gritty of what you've got lined up for us?
Oh yeah, if you want to get into it now, or start up another, do it on a separate
show. We can get into it. This is the academic one. This is the harking back to the old days with McMillan III.
Yeah, we got. Yeah, there's just so many things to do. We'll just do them as that. We'll just do them in as many recordings or as many days a week as we can catch up, and I'll be. Now that I got my website, wait, how long has this recording been going on?
25 minutes, 26.
All right. So you want to run through this and try to make it an hour? All right.
Yeah, we can do an hour or like go a bit over the hour. That's not a problem.
All right. Yeah, let's just go through this kind of relatively quickly, but the audience needs to know that each one of these points is a tremendous rabbit hole that's going to have to be covered in a separate video by itself, which is, in other words, we're just going to talk about, when we talk about this slide set, it's basically what we're going to be talking about for the next couple of months.
All right. That's good. We're going to have to write more jokes into this material.
Yeah. Oh, obviously. Well, what else are you going to do? I mean,
the professors, all educators at all levels.
Yeah. So we're going to get into the different strategic plans of the left. So this 7P plan also works with Marcuse's repressive tolerance of shouting down, free markets and conservative religious thinkers on the college campuses since the 1950s. He's a Frankfurt School guy with the other ones. Also, Cloward and Piven plan of 1966 to overload Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society programs to basically bankrupt the United States and then compel confiscatory taxation to transform America from a Christian capitalist society to a socialist atheistic society over time. So, and then there's Gene Sharp's nonviolent revolution to it's against the militancy of the United States. He was against the Korean War, and he was against the Vietnam War. But again, what's his name? Joaquin Flores. You did a video on Gene Sharp last year, or was it longer? I can't remember.
Yeah.
So the left focus on organizing community organizers to do protests in the civil rights era and Vietnam era inside the United States was also used by the intelligence communities to do color revolutions. And there's a whole bunch of books written about that. So Gene Sharp strategies is what's behind, well, the Antifa BLM stuff ultimately. And also on how to, the color revolutions abroad. So you get that strategy occurring with the logarithmic population growth of the developing world. They want to go to an open border strategy. So the 7P plan strategy is a way to discuss all those other strategies in one grand strategy. So people need to know that off the top. So when you get into each one of those areas, we got to do, I got a whole bunch of new papers and slide sets to do. We need to also go over the old slide sets because a lot of people haven't watched them, and we need to do a lot of stuff. So this is basically going to be a discussion of what we're going to be discussing over the next year.
Do clue us in. Let's go point by point.
Yeah, we just want people to know what the 7 Ps are, and then we'll do it in detail as time goes by.
So the first one is Professor P.
Yeah. So, well, go to the top of the slide set. Yeah. So, yeah, this is just a 7P plan in bullet paragraphs. Okay. Then, yeah. Okay. Okay. So the first P is the Professor P, and what they started, what the Frankfurt School initially started to do when they moved over to the United States, was to try to take over the Western university system, because once you take control of the university system, you can control the other P's. That's the press, the prosecutors, the police, the priests, all those other things. Not in that order. I got it in a slightly different order. I just did it off the top of my head. But they want to change. They want to replace the Christian free market capitalist curriculum with feminist and Marxist curriculum over time. And we're going to get to why. So go on to the next P.
All right. The prosecutor P.
All right. The prosecutor P, means taking over the law schools. And down at the bottom, we'll get to some of the actual books. But just to be real quick, Rousseau, in his discourse on inequality, talked about the creation of property rights led to the subjugation of men over other men to create class inequality, and then creation of marital rights allowed men to subjugate women, creating gender inequality. The Abrahamic religions, 10 commandments have thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery. So that's the affirmation of property rights and marital rights. So they want to get rid of the Abrahamic religions. And in Marx and Engels, the private property, the origin of the family, the state, and private property, they said that the patriarchal convention is the subjugation of women. Therefore, you need to go back to a matriarchal conception of the family, which means a dissolution of the patriarchal nuclear family, and a matriarchal system would just be a single parent mothers. So which does not work. It's crazy. All leftism is just insane. So yeah, so it wants to get rid of. Okay, Rousseau's thought was countered by Adam Smith. Adam Smith, his initial writings were Causes Belli, Causes for War. His second major series of lectures was his lectures on jurisprudence, which relates the evolution of property rights to the evolution of the, well, at that point it was the nascent industrial revolution. So the increase of economic productivity. So correlation of property rights, increase of economic productivity, which then became the basis of his wealth of nations. Increasing division of labor and organization increases economic growth. So that becomes the basis of free market economic growth theories. So in the law schools, you're replacing the Montesquieu, Hume, Smith ways of thinking to protect property rights with the dissolution of property rights with the Rousseau, Marx, Engels thought lineage. So you want to do that over a series of generations until you can weed out all conservative thinkers and then replace all the the university professors with leftist thinkers who then raise the students who then go into government. So here you want to take over all the government attorneys because you want to take over the justice system and the prosecutors at the federal, state, and local levels. So that's what that's about. And they've been pretty successful about it because my constitutional law professors, I won't say where, but they were incrementalist socialists Well, they were, I don't want to overstate it. They wanted a more left-leaning form of government. The problem with that is there's no logical stopping point between, once you start going down that slippery slope, you go all the way over to communism. They did warn against it. But yeah, they also started the slippery slope that we're too far down now.
Too far down? Are we? Shared this on my Instagram the other day. Got a couple of good reactions. That, you know, it's poetic how nature does that.
Yeah, the pink hair and the purple hair, again, is against evolutionary stable strategies. Make themselves as ugly as possible because they don't want to be beautiful for men because they're supposed to be against the patriarchy. So they disfigure themselves and make themselves as ugly as possible. So that's the notion of that. All right, please do not date them, by the way.
The police fee, all gun carriers.
Yeah, all right. The original, okay, well, you had the French Revolution. The Jacobins tried to overthrow the Christian, Catholic aristocracy, monarchy in France and the French-speaking countries. So the next big series of left-leaning protests is revolutions of 1848, which really spread across Western and Central Europe. Again, if people aren't familiar with the revolutions of 1848, Hobsbawm is one of the key leftist writers in that era, in that of that topic. People can also look it up on YouTube videos or on Wikipedia to get a quick rundown. But the communist revolutions between 1848 and 1906 were always, in France, Belgium, and Western Germany, Ruhr Valley area, pretty much, Bavaria. All of those revolutions were put down by the police. So in Bavaria, it was the police, and in other parts of Germany, it was the Prussian military and Prussian police. It wasn't really Germany at the time. So taking over the military and police has always been a primary, has always been a goal of the left. So again, once you start taking over once you start changing the curriculum in the undergraduate university system, you're changing the curriculum in the law schools, but then you're also trying to change the curriculum in the criminal justice academy systems that the police usually go into, as a way to change the officer corps, to change the training academy in the police, to then change the incoming police to follow leftist policies instead of, traditional Christian American policies. So again, the critical point here is, if you use the Cloward and Piven plan to bankrupt America, but you don't control, if the left doesn't control
the what plan? The what plan?
Cloward and Piven plan.
You want to explain that?
Okay. It's a lot of people have talked about it on YouTube. So, people can watch their videos to get a quick rundown of it. But Cloward and Piven were sociologists at Columbia. Again, they came over as part of the Frankfurt School. You had the Frankfurt School, but you also had the Emil Durkheim School of Sociology that was trying to displace Max Weber's theory of sociology. Okay, so Cloward and Piven were at Columbia University with Lazarsfeld and a whole bunch of other people that were in that genre, and they wanted to bring about socialism. So they wanted to bankrupt the United States by taking, Federal Delano Roosevelt started the Social Security program, and then Lyndon Baines Johnson took over from Kennedy after he was assassinated and created the Great Society programs, a whole bunch of welfare programs. So that you want to accelerate those programs to increase the federal budget deficits to as high as possible, to then compel confiscatory taxes against the rich, so you can massively redistribute income and achieve socialism incrementally. So you use the voting power of the democratic process and under the Fabian incremental socialist strategy to turn democracies into socialist utopias, as opposed to the Marxist plan through violent revolution.
When you say socialist utopia, you're saying that sarcastically, yeah?
Yes. Okay.
Because I couldn't quite get the sarcasm.
This is a comedy show. So utopia is sarcasm, okay? I constantly have to remind you that this is comedy.
The viewer.
So you have two things occurring in the United States. They're doing the 7P plan. They're doing it incrementally, as the far left is also getting better at the revolutionary aspect. In case people missed the Antifa BLM riots.
We reached the politicians, but we've got. I'm not the best accounting, but we've got still a couple of P's to go. The priest P.
All right. So, okay, if you're changing the curriculum of the law of the pre-law and law schools, and you're changing the curriculum of the political science and the criminal justice classes for the prosecutors and the police, you also want to start altering the where are we number 5, the police P. So you're also going to change the curriculum in the priest P of the, because you want to take over. I'm sorry, you want to take over the theological schools as well. You want to change their curriculum. So if you want to get rid of property rights and marital rights, to get rid of class and gender inequality, then you need to start to change the Christian religion to do so. So in this case, you want to say that the patriarchal religion is outdated and you should go to a matriarchal system and have the welfare program to support it. So they start wanting to have gender inequality and start to increase funding for feminist studies in the university system, which, again, Janice Fiumingo does a great show on the rise, on the connection between Marxism and feminism. Yeah, I mean, I was assigned a lot of women's studies books at my universities, but she does a great show of, so you don't have to read the books, you can just watch her videos instead and get the skinny on it. But
what was the name?
To put Janice Fiumingo. She's a retired professor from Ottawa. Yeah, Fiumingo, it's Fiamingo.
All right, we'll let people find it. So we've done the priest. So we do the press.
With my videos, I have to give homework. Otherwise, people don't know where I'm getting this information from, or I want to list corroborative sources because I do overarching analysis. Other people do very specific news shows. Okay,
yes,
so we're at.
That is why we're happy to have you, George. We're at the 6th one.
Yeah, so the 6th is the press. So you're also changing the curriculum in the schools of journalism. You can just see what the media does. They're into, anything that puts leftism in a bad light, they don't report. And yes, if you're a free market, Austrian school, libertarian economist like I am, or not, I'm not an economist, but economics advocate like I am, well, you have to put that into a bad light. So they don't perform autopsies on any of the failed Marxist, socialist, communist, or they don't talk about Venezuela, for instance. They never put that in a bad light. Okay, my unified behavioral theory was predicated on when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Rousseau, Marx, Engels-based literature should have been wiped out in the field of philosophy and on the social science side. and the entire social sciences should have gravitated towards a Montesquieu Hume-Smith based theories, but instead the university system throughout, as accurate theories of human behavior is what I mean to say. They did the opposite. They discarded the accurate theories of behavior, and they're trying to push the Rousseau, Marx, Engels theories of human behavior. So this is going to end up in a catastrophe. We can see it coming on a lot of fronts. They're bankrupting the United States to bring about a utopia, but they need to take over the police and gun carrier P, because otherwise they're going to be affecting a right-wing coup instead of a left-wing coup. So they're trying to change the police at a time when the neoconservatives are trying to start World War III. So you're gutting the gun carrier groups at a time where you're about to go to war. Like, that's a good strategy. I mean, none of this, they're working at a whole bunch of cross purposes. None of it makes sense. It can't end well. But
I was gonna save this meme for later, but considering you brought up World War III and mobilization in the States, when the military ads start to have white males in them, we're actually going to war. Any comment?
We'll comment later. Let's just do the next P, because the last one, the last one is the parental P, and people, again, we'll, as I start to redo the slide sets on this, as we get down the road, I didn't want to throw it in this, it'll take too long. Too many rabbit holes. But Marxist feminist literature is about, you have to create a bigger welfare state so women can have children out of wedlock and be supported. And of course, it ends up into so many different problems. When you get in, oh boy, we got to get into it later. But yeah, the end goal of Marxism and feminism is to get rid of, a father-headed household, which it just brings up a whole bunch of psychological problems. But because this is the goal, I will get into it. I can't stop being me. We're going to just give a brief.
It's okay, George. You don't have to apologize, man. Number one, we're honored to have you here. Number two, people have been asking you for over 6 months. So I'm happy. As long as you're happy to talk about it, I'm happy to hear you talk. And I'm sure people who are actually interested in the subject will be very glad to hear you talk and me stop interrupting you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When the Frankfurt School started, Erich Fromm was a prominent member of it in the 30s. They moved over to flee, that regime that was in Western and Central Europe at the time.
The fans of nuts. The fans of nuts of the failed painter.
Yeah, the failed painter.
With lots of fans of nuts. They were Nazis.
Yeah. Exactly. So anyway, Eric, this is so messed up. The Office of Strategic Intelligence, before it was the Central Intelligence Agency, hired a bunch of these people because they focused on psychological manipulation techniques. Erich Fromm went to New York and started working with theologian Paul Tillich to actually correlate the relationship between religion and productive character orientation, and the relationship between ideologies and productive character orientations, as opposed to creating sadomasochistic psychological disorders. So you're trying to relate psychological health to ideologies and religion. Well, the thing is, they actually worked together and actually produced a real theory of human behavior. We're going to get into this in an upcoming slide set. They did what they needed to do, but the field of psychology got rid of them and all the people that contributed to that project, because they all advocated the domain-specific evolutionary psychological premise that men are different than women. If men are different than women, then educating them the same isn't going to create an equal outcome. They need to be trained. They need to be educated and trained complementary. to fulfill a role for self-survival and survival of the species, so that way social psychology can merge with evolutionary theory. Now, leftist strategies based on domain general infinitely malleable premise, the 57 gender premise, that if you trained and educated men and women to be the same, they would end up the same. No, once you got women into the, well, I'll just go there. Once you got women into the university system, they wiped out all the objective the scientific methodologies and went to total subjectivism. So now you can no longer relate. They got rid of all the two-gender Freudian psychological theories. Now they can't organize the field of psychology, which is extremely schematizable. So they got rid of all of that. They started changing the diagnostic statistical manual. They're up to DMB5 now. If everybody was infinitely malleable, this is how destroyed this is, then there would be no psychological disorders. Yet Rousseau's Origin on Inequality, and very, very specifically Engels, it's in those, it's in the bottom. These books are in the bottom thumbnails. Engels, the private origin of the family, private property, and the state is specifically based on a domain gender infinitely malleable premise. So if you can't relate, so now they can't relate how, okay, if you have a domain general premise, you're saying that people have to be educated. But way before there was ever any written language, men and women had to survive by instincts. If they survived by instinctual drives, that means these complementary roles are innate, not learned. So they tossed out the domain-specific theories that account for the survival of the human species in Darwinian evolutionary terms, but yet they want to get rid of religion too. So it's not compatible. Leftist theory isn't compatible with evolutionary theory, nor is it compatible with revealed religion. So there is reality. There is no basis. There is no foundational basis for leftist theory at all. So yeah, then it has no basis in reality at all. It starts to go deeper into delusions. And where I want to go with this is we got to do a video on Tubius and Comita's psychological foundations of culture, because they're evolutionary biologists and evolutionary theorists. And they talk about how once the social sciences get into, once evolutionary psychology gets into social psychology and sociology, after that, the philosophical and social sciences are a totally logically incoherent mess. Now, that's going to take a few videos to do, because once the leftists they argued that once the 1960s liberals took over the department chairs of 1980s, they abandoned the scientific project in the Western university system. And this is at the heart of the changing of the curriculum. They had to stop comparative ideological systems analysis, because if you're comparing free market theories to Marx, Engels, non-market communist theories, and free market or market socialist theories, it wouldn't be free markets because it's control market, then those things radically underperform the free market theories. So they're wiping out the scientific projects so they don't have to teach both competing hypotheses. Because if they start teaching the students competing hypotheses, well, you're going to get rid of the whole leftist thought lineage. Well, their purpose is to advance it and weed out the other thought lineages. So they've discarded the accurate theories of behaviors in the macro side, but on the micro behavioral side in psychology and sociology, they got rid of the two gender theories. So now they've destroyed the more accurate theories of human behavior on the micro behavioral side and on the macro behavioral side at the same time by abandoning the scientific project. because they don't want people to perform autopsies on failed Marxist experiments. And then they don't want people on the psychological side to start noticing that once you got rid of the two-gender premise and the patriarchal family, psychological problems increased, they didn't decrease. So then to hide that, then they have to change the diagnostic statistical manual to cover that mistake. So now they're just paper overing mistakes like crazy. And again, when you go down to the bottom, the thumbnails of the books is, slide down a couple of sets, is, you want to move towards these base theories is what you need to, for abstract causality in the field of philosophy, you want to gravitate more towards those. Again, when we get into the unified behavioral theory, you want to actually use for measurement, analytical measurement frameworks. Well, it's Tooby and Kosmida's integrated causal model connected to Eric Fromm's sadistic, productive versus sadomasochistic dichotomy, connected to Aristotle's proper and perverted form, government form dichotomy, and then to the virtuous versus vicious economic cycles of the per capita GNP function of economic growth theories over population growth proportions, and then that equals first and second more developed countries, or third and fourth world, less developed countries, because those categories are all based on economic growth, population growth proportions, and a tight versus catastrophically loose wage labor rate. So you can take a constructive versus destructive behavioral dynamic model and use those frameworks to get a singular system of the philosophical and social sciences in one shot. But what the left did was they got rid of all those accurate theories, explanatory theories, and they got rid of the measurement systems also. So now they've abandoned the scientific projects so people won't see their mistakes, but now it's just a downward spiral in the university system of complete nonsense. Everybody knows that, but the purpose of me stating it is I want to specifically define the problem so you can specifically arrive at a conclusion of what exactly they changed and what exactly we need to change back. Obviously, we need another forum to do it in, and that's the projects I've been working on. In my absence from Working Brother here. So if we could just go down to the thumbnails real quick. And if you got anything
one second. If I got what?
Yeah, go to the one up above. Oh wait.
This one?
Yeah, go to that one. Okay, I just want people to see what books I'm talking about, just real quick. There's a lot more books behind these, but we want to hit the major ones real quick. When Tooby and Kosmidas talk about abandoning the scientific project, what are they talking about? Okay, in Novum Organum, written by Francis Bacon, he wants to apply the Newtonian scientific method to the philosophical and social sciences. So that's an a priori hypothesis in the first phase, testing careful observation in the second phase, and then in the third, you're doing the ex post analysis, and then the theoretical reformulation phase in the third part. So if you apply it to the great ideological experiments of capitalism versus communism, then what you're doing is you're taking the Montesquieu Hume-Smith thought lineage versus the Rousseau-Marx-Engels thought lineage. So the 20th century ideological experiments would be your middle testing and careful observation phase. And then after Soviet Union collapsed, the Western University should have gone into a massive ex post analysis theoretical reformulation phase. That's the basis of my unified behavioral theory, is following the basic scientific process outlined by Bacon's Novum Organum. All right. Going to Descartes' discourse on method. Well, he starts to invent the Cartesian plane system of, okay, and what has gone into is, in measurement systems, you have nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio levels of modeling. So in a nominal system, you just have a scale, well, it's a 0 to 1 scale or 0 to 100 scale, whatever you're going to do it. Or it's a balance scale of -5 and 5, if it's going to be like a seesaw scale. Whatever it is you're measuring, you're going to do one or the other, or percentages thereof. So if you have one thing in a measurement scale, so I do technology and population growth. As technology increases, your population growth develops over time. We'll get into those graphs. So if you get a nominal scale and you start to put measurement systems on it, like a good or a bad, and you value it, you cut it in half basically, then it's an ordinal scale. If you start to put other measurement systems in it, like an American football field goes by 5 and 10 yard increments, then the hash markets are 1 yard increments. That would be an example of an interval level scale. And if one thing causes another, and you take one interval scale and you relate it to another, now you have an XY axis. You can calculate slope, and then you're into Cartesian modeling. So Cartesian modeling is how to take concepts and convert them into measurement systems by going through the nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio level of modeling steps. So when you're talking about the scientific project, you're talking about Bacon's, 3 phases: a priori hypothesis, testing observation, ex post analysis, theoretical reformulation phase, but you want to do it in a cause and effect format also. So then you start to do the independent variable, dependent variable outcome measure systems to build Cartesian plane models. The field of economic theory has done that in detail, and you can take the per capita GNP function, use it in my sense, create a 4 category, take the first, second, third world categories that were subjective, turn it, add a fourth world fail state aspect of it, make it a function of economic growth, population growth proportions, relate that to Aristotle's 6 forms of government, because democracies only exist in tight wage labor market areas. So you can take economic modeling and mathematics and push it over to the other macro social sciences. Okay, then all I do to create from that pattern, I can just I can take Eric Fromm's theory and Maslow's and Rogers' self-actualization fulfillment theories, and that correlates very directly to Aristotle's 6 forms of government to build your constructive versus destructive micro-macro behavioral model. And then you can use this thing for a wide variety of things. So when they took out the scientific project, I need to explain to people so they understand how I'm systematically putting everything back just by going to the old school books. Okay. Karl Popper's book, Logic of Scientific Discovery, that was focusing on applying, again, it follows the Bacon Descartes modeling of how to start adopting that to the philosophical and social sciences. It's a lengthy book, but Marxism is what you call a linear directional theory. They think that that moving from the feudal system to capitalism and democracy is a stepping stone of people really want equality over time, and then it's going to go into socialism and communism. So they have historicism. They feel like it's historically inevitable that we're going to go through that. Okay, the opposing theory is a psychological dynamic analysis of Nietzsche. It's in the other thumbnails, but leave it on this one real quick. Of countries, of nations and cultures rise and fall. So you have the linear directional theories versus the cyclical theories of nations and or civilizations rise and fall over time. I don't want to go big into that. We'll go into that later. But moving over to Ferris's Handbook of Modern Sociology, that's a key book in a number of, I want to get back to Popper real quick. What Popper says in his end chapters is how to overcome your confirmational bias. He says basically double down on, he wants you to try to prove yourself wrong, to double check your own biases. So that's John Hersanya. He got a Nobel Prize with Selton and Nash in '94. In his 69 article, his article written in the 1960s, I forget the year, did an article on Popper and started talking about different measurement systems and thought that his last chapter was actually an error. You shouldn't necessarily do that. But no, I think that's good to double down on your own confirmational bias. I spent a while double checking my own biases and try to be objective as possible. Analysis paralysis. It took me a while to work through that because I just wanted to double check myself. Everybody
Did you find out in the end it was all Russian propaganda? Time traveling Russian propaganda. Can't forget about that.
Oh yeah. Well, and then brought to the United States by Trump, of course.
Whoa, we're gonna get into Trump. I got a Trump video.
No,
but finish this. Yeah. Finish this.
All right. Ferris's Handbook of Modern Sociology, 1964. A few things are of note. The field of sociology was supposed to figure out how to fuse post-Freudian psychological theories to political theories. Again, the solution to that is Fromm's productive versus sadomasochistic character orientation related to Aristotle's 6 forms of government. Fromm's theory incorporates all the other frameworks, but not vice versa. So that's the dominant one. Salvador Matti did a few books on that, on personality theories, a comparative analysis. I have that thumbnail in another slide set, not this one. But yeah, it's my method of analysis does what the field of sociology was supposed to do, but the field of sociology went straight into leftism because of the Frankfurt School and the Durkheim School. Erich Fromm was against the Durkheim School and ended up with the real theory of human behavior. So he was basically excommunicated from the Frankfurt School. He's rewarded for all of his hard work by, being partially canceled. His books are very accurate because he really said that, the form of socialism practiced in Western Europe during the 30s and Marxist socialism actually ended up being both tyrannical and genocidal to segments of its population, and were actually both equally bad. So again, being against his own personal bias of being center-left, the left didn't like it at all and discluded his thought, even though it's very accurate and very even-handed. Very even-handed. Again, socialists don't know the other part of my theory, so they like to be left-leaning because they think socialism and a social welfare net is nice, but it only can work under low population growth conditions. When we get into the other models that talk about the logarithmic growth of developing world population, it cannot work with an open border situation. So again, psychologists don't understand how the macro end of the model works to come up with a coherent level of thought. I want to go to the other book. That's Hersanye's, the blue book on the end. Yeah, that one. That's Hersanye's collection of ethics and game theory and economics. So yeah, he's got a few papers there of note. I just mentioned the paper on Popper. He's also got a paper in there on the necessity to laterally integrate the micro and macro disciplines. I followed that criteria. Again, we'll get into that when I explain the UBT. That's going to be down the road. He also has a paper in there on how to build physics models. Physics models are two-force models. He suggested that the two forces in economic theory should be economic gain and social status. Economic gain was a single mode of theory of Anthony Downs in the theory of economic theory of democracy, 1957. And social status was by Thorstein Veblen in his book, The Leisure Class. Physics models are always based on two-force theories. The one I use as an example is aeronautics. Aeronautics theories are based on the unseen forces of gravity and atmospheric density. You can't measure each one directly, but you can measure them indirectly. Well, atmospheric density can in wind tunnels. Gravity, you test by testing how something works on land, or on Earth and space and other planets, because you're going to have different, or different gravity densities. So you have different ways of measuring these forces, but you measure them on Earth by the factors of lift, thrust, weight, and drag to get heavier than air objects off the ground and then to fly. So his theory, or he advocated on how to get the whole social science, or he wanted to get, because this guy's a physics level mathematician, he wanted to get the whole philosophical and social sciences down to a two-force model. So he suggested those two-force models. Well, economic gain, social status is very similar in concept to the pursuit of resources and mates used in anthropological study. And as I discussed previously, in Darwinian evolutionary theory, the two forces, the two unseen forces, are survival, self-survival, and survival of the species. So since you have those similar conceptions across the micro and macro behavioral strategies that underline the frameworks I just mentioned, now you can get the whole philosophical and social sciences down to a two-force framework. We'll talk about that later on. Go to the thumbnail on. Nice. Go to the thumbnail on sociobiology.
Is that this one? Or
No,
this
it's
one?
the
Further up?
go back. Yeah, same page.
Oh, okay, yeah, I got it. I saw it. This one.
Okay. People have been talking about the lack of logical incongruity in the social sciences. So one of the founding fathers of that was E.O. Wilson. So that's his trying to get an integrated causal model in the field of evolutionary theory. Well, evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology. He started that. Tobias Kosmides and a bunch of other people worked under him at Harvard. He went up to UCSB. He wrote a book in 1999 called Consilience. And again, it's like Tobias Kosmides' book. It argues that once you get into evolutionary, post-Watson and Crick evolutionary theory, the philosophical and social sciences are a complete mess. It needs to be fixed. I want to skip Joseph Cropsey's History of Political Philosophy real quick. I kind of put these out of order and go to the adapted mind. Tobias Kosmides then write in this book, they've integrated evolutionary theory and evolutionary biology, evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology. So then their article, Psychological Foundations, Culture, and the Adapted Mind, is somebody needs to, well, it's the left abandoned the scientific project by having autarkic, independent disciplines that don't work together, and now the social sciences are completely dysfunctional and should not be called sciences. And they pegged this to when the 1960s liberals took over the professor chairs in the 1980s, and then they gradually started weeding out conservatives. So again, why is this listed in the 7P plan? Well, they don't know why, but the 7P plan explains why. They've systematically changing the curriculum to replace patriarchal theories and gender differentiated theories, which is gender domain specific foundation premises, and replace it with domain general 57 gender premises that men and women would be the same if you educated them the same. So, but they don't know why, and it's an ideological reason of the left wants to avoid performing autopsies on failed Marxist experiments because they want to bring about the socialist utopia, which of course is going to bring about a dystopia. Let's go to the bounds of reason next. Herbert Gintis from the Game Theory of Economics wrote a 2006 article in Brain and Behavioral Sciences titled Game Theory and the Unification of the Behavioral Sciences, again, meaning micro and macro psychological and political, economic, and geopolitical theories. He never got a research design, so he never got to first base with that project, but he did outline a whole bunch of different criteria. I did email him while I was in Afghanistan that I was already working on the project. I kind of traded emails with him before, but never really followed up because I was overseas. But I kept on work. I was working on Hersonier's criteria first, developed the model, and then met most of his criteria except for the last one, which is mathematics, because that's going to take an army of people. I need to get into the game theory community and to do that because they're already experts in that kind of physics math modeling. I have everything lined up and ready for them to go, but that's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time. I want to go back to the History of Philosophy by Strauss and Cropsey. That's a critical book. Yeah, I know we're running over time, but I got to finish this thought. Nathan Tarkov of Chicago University Political Science Department talks about the movement of leftism and discarding classical political philosophy, particularly the nomos physis distinction. The nomos physis distinction is from the ancient Greeks, is the difference between the laws of man versus the laws of nature. So I want to substitute the laws of man to the ideological delusions or fantasies or aspirations of man. So Marxism is a delusion. It's a delusion in every way, shape, or sphere. So when you go back to the scientific process and you're comparing free market non-central controller theories versus Marxist centrally planned theories, well, clearly the non-central controller theories have higher productivity growth, living standards, and everything, as long as population growth doesn't exceed economic growth. So you have a success-failure proportions in that. So when the leftists abandon the classical philosophy, they abandon the nomos physis distinction, which is the essence of the scientific method that they also abandoned. So when you abandon the scientific project, now they have a whole bunch of nonsensical theories, and we're at, the United States is 35 trillion in debt, but we're really 200 trillion in underfunded mandates from the Great Society programs that they increased. So yeah, no, this isn't going to work out very well when the Cloward and Pivot plan collapses. So yeah, once you start to get rid of the scientific project you're getting rid of all the inputs from these great works. So yeah, I just explained how these different works are interrelated was the purpose of this discussion. And yeah, the end of it, we need to go back to scientific project. You can click down a little bit. Yeah, so that's, again, okay, the point of this is these books are written in the Enlightenment theories in the foundational political, economic, geopolitical order. And then if you click down to the Marx Engels books, yeah, that one, those are also written in that order. Okay, Human Smith didn't write about geopolitical order. Kant did internal peace. So I substitute that because it's compatible on there's different continuums to compare. But if you have an evolutionary theory as your instinctual drive constant, again, you're going to go to a Tubin-Kosmides integrated causal model based on the domain specific premise. Men are different than women, two genders. So then you can put, okay, oh wait, let me back up a second. The foundational philosophy and Enlightenment theory, that breaks in modern, that's pre-Darwinian and pre-Freudian theory. So when you go to modern post-Freudian frameworks, it goes into evolutionary theory and psychological theory. So again, this is why I'm using Tubin-Kosmides integrated causal model and then extending it throughout the social sciences with my research design. So then the field of psychology becomes the first independent variable. The field of political government form theories become the macro independent, the second independent variable. Then the field of economics over demographic theory become your dependent variable. Then the four category political form model then becomes your outcome measure. So this format lends itself to the Cartesian modeling format is the purpose of this, of me laying out these books in a matrix form. When I was developing this theory, I literally took the competing hypothesis and laid them on the floor. So then you can weed out the philosophical theories, go to an updated series of psychological frameworks, so you can replace it. So yes, the 7P plan is going to fail. And when it comes to replace, the curriculum that they've changed, we need to put it back, but in another form. So I guess we can end it. We can end it here. We're going to go on to a more of a discussion of these things in our later works. I just put the books up on. Yeah, go ahead and put the last series of books up in thumbnails. I just want people to see what we have there. Oh, did you already click it down?
No, hold on. Here. There we go.
These different Enlightenment philosophers have different certain aspects that are right and certain aspects that they're wrong about. In physics type models, you take the ones that are closest to accurate, and then you keep on working the intervening logic to accurize your theories. But the more you do that, the more and once you get your basic models in the social sciences, I already mentioned the frameworks, then you start each subfield theory that you add, you're operationalizing something in the field of philosophy, some segment that is accurate. So that's what starts to schematize and operationalize the field of philosophy. In other words, the field of philosophy, 3/4 of what they teach should be thrown out, like in the social sciences too. You should, if you're like, oh, your model is so complex. No, it's not. You should be throwing out 70 or 80% of what they teach now. Well, you should be throwing out close to 100% of what they teach now.
George, I have a question. Did you watch the Tucker Carlson and Putin interview?
Yes, I did.
I was getting flashbacks when you started bringing up, the history of psychology and sociology and all this stuff. But I mean,
yeah.
like the Putin interview, sitting down with you for a talk is well worth it, and listening to what you have to say is, well, one could describe it as education, university level education. Do you want to give us your quick reaction to this little short Trump video that's relatively new?
Would you be willing to take NATO expansion off the table if that's what it took to get the Russians and the Ukrainians to make a deal? Would you be willing to do that?
So for 20 years, I heard that NATO, if Ukraine goes into NATO, it's a real problem for Russia. I've heard that for a long time. And I think that's really why this war started. I'm not sure that this war would have started. Biden was saying all of the wrong things. And one of the wrong things, he was saying, no, Ukraine will go into NATO. That's one of the many things he said. When I listened to him speak, I said, this guy is going to start a war. Because as you know, for 4 years, there was never even talk of Russia going into Ukraine. That would have never happened. Russia was not going to attack Ukraine.
Reaction?
All right. Yeah, we're way over time.
It's okay.
No. Do another video.
Mm-hmm.
B-roll that with the DW videos I'm going to send you on natural gas.
All right.
And I can do that off the top of my head, even though I got slide sets on it. But just B-roll that and shoot another video.
All right. We can do that. Everybody who stuck around to the end, thank you. Get this music going. Like, share, subscribe if you're new here. Hope you like the comedy. George, thank you for coming on again. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
We'll be back momentarily. Everyone, peace out.